The prophetic spirit of God was upon Isaiah, the great prophet. And when he wrote these lines, he was probably middle-aged or older. But because he was filled with God's Spirit, he felt young again. He felt like a bridegroom, filled with desire, filled with love, filled with a longing for a better future in which his dreams would be fulfilled. He also felt like a bride, beautifully adorned with all types of jewels. But his beauty did not come from anything material, but rather came from his knowledge of the closeness and the power of God. And he said, I'm being sent out in the midst of the people to set captives free, to heal the brokenhearted, to bring glad tidings to the poor, to the destitute, to set the human heart free. I am filled with joy. The Greek roots for the word enthusiasm means to be filled with God, and he was certainly enthusiastic. He was filled with God. And so often the opponents of religion attack religion for stifling the human spirit, limiting the human imagination, and taking all the fun out of life. When truth is just the opposite. Our faith in the power of God sets us free. It has our minds and our hearts soar to embrace the world in love and to transform our own lives into being prophetic examples that God is alive and well in the world today. Now, St. Paul, in today's letter to the Thessalonians, perhaps the earliest piece of sacred scripture from the New Testament. He wrote to the Thessalonians and he said, I constantly pray for you and give thanks to God for you. And if we want to be filled with that Spirit of God, we have to have a constancy in our prayer, and our prayer should be basically one of thanksgiving, thanking God for our faith, our life, our families, our friends, and even thanking God for the challenges and the crosses we have to bear, because if we rely on God, they will not break us, but make us whole and make us holy. And then out of that prayer of thanksgiving came his prayer of petition that the Thessalonians would be whole and holy and avoid whatever was evil, whatever was degrading, whatever would ultimately rob them of joy. And this is the challenge that we face, because the world around us and our own weakness within us tempts us to stifle the Spirit of God and embrace the spirit of a world that is really conspiring against us. And we know in our own culture, in our own society, how many alluring temptations there are. First, there is the temptation of leading a life of hedonism, a life of the pursuit of pleasure, and of promiscuity. I was just surfing through the television channels the other night, as only men can do. We're never satisfied. Click, 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 jumping from one station to the next. Goes back to that hunter-gatherer genes from our ancestors. We're always looking for another rabbit to catch. And I stopped for a few seconds, and there was a show on, evidently, a resort that catered to college-age young people, and they just finished a summer of debauchery and had one last big party of drunkenness and promiscuity. And one of the guys is packing up, and he said, well, I didn't meet the girl of my dreams down here. You know, I didn't meet somebody that I could really fall in love with. Then he sighed and he said, I guess you got to find a girl like that in a supermarket or in church. Well, yeah. I mean, it takes a genius to figure this out? But that notion that we can find our masculinity and our femininity through promiscuity is such a lie. It brings so much heartbreak sorrow, tears, broken lives, broken families, and shattered futures. And there are other temptations too, such as greed. Accumulate as many material things as you can. Now it's important, we're material creatures. We need food, shelter, clothing. We need transportation. There are some basic needs we need to survive in our society and culture. And when a person buys his or her first car, it's a great thrill. They get that far in their economic life and they enjoy it, but then after a year or two, they were thrilled with the car. Now the car is not so thrilling. Maybe I should get a bigger car, a better car, or even a second car. You know? And you can start accumulating more and more things, and after a while, the things that we own can own us. And they cause us so much worry and anxiety. I got a dent there, I've got to renew the registration here, now I've got to pay for insurance there, I've got to call up that stupid little Geico and try to be safe on my auto. Greed could rob us of joy and rob us of our freedom. And then there's that envy. Somebody is always going to be better off than us. Someone else is always going to be more popular, more successful, better at sports, or just plain lucky. And if we allow envy to dominate our lives, we'll have a great bitterness. Life is unfair. I deserve that. Why can't I have that? The saints have said envy is like a very, very sharp knife with no handle. If you cling to it, you'll only cut your own hand. It's one of the vices that have no payoffs. Then there's the temptation towards laziness. The good life is a life of leisure. I remember a number of years ago I asked a small group of high school students, I said, where do you picture yourself at age 35? And most of them said, well, married, having a nice home, a good job. But one of them said, I plan to be retired. Didn't have a plan of how to get to retirement at age 35, but that was his dream. To be able to spend your life doing nothing. What a sad life. When we know that at 65 and 75, people that are fully alive are still looking for things to do, for things to accomplish. That's the good life. So there's many temptations that could rob us of joy, rob us of our human dignity. St. Paul says, avoid all of those things and embrace the Spirit of God. That means we may have to visit somebody in prison, comfort somebody who is sick, console someone who is grieving, help out the poor in our own family, our own communities, the needy. Do whatever we can to build up the human spirit. And when we do that, we become prophets, much like Isaiah. Then we become beautiful people, much like the saints and the apostles throughout history. When we received our sacrament of confirmation, and some are still looking forward to receiving that, the young people here, we were given the Spirit of God to be called upon when we need it, so that we could be heroes and heroines in the life of this world, living with strength and dignity, looking for love and finding it according to God's plan. And when we do that, our enthusiasm will never waver. Yes, there will be sad moments in our lives. There will be moments of grief at the loss of a loved one. There'll be moments of intense anxiety when we can't find a job or make ends meet. There will be tears of sorrow when we see someone we care about wrecking their lives and there seems to be nothing we could do about it. That's part of the ebb and flow of being alive in this world. But if we keep calling upon that Spirit of God over and over, then we'll have the strength to bear what needs to be borne in our lives. And we'll be prepared to be a solace and strength for others. And then we too will be able to be prepared to accept into our lives ever more fully that Lord of Calvary. We in our own ways will be like John the Baptist, straightening out the crooked paths of this world so that the Lord could travel through it, gather his disciples, and the human spirit can soar.